We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on the Russ Belville Show are their own, and the Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we think if we criminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Yeah, good day, tokers and tokettes, and welcome. It is Tuesday, September 25th, 2012, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world, or Black Tuesday, as us Green Bay Packers fans call it. But we'll talk about that in hour two, Toker Talk Radio. Right now, we got to get to the marijuana news. There is so much going on in the headlines, and I'm so happy to have back from Anchorage, Alaska, our news director, Cannabis Karri, is in the virtual studio. Hi, Karri.
Hi, I'm really glad to be back from Alaska. Beautiful up there.
I know, and you sound great. What do we got in the headline? What do we have in the headlines today, Karri?
Well, today we have a follow-up. 2 weeks ago, I brought you a story about a citizens' initiative in Springfield, Missouri. They had put a decrim measure in front of the city council. I've got an update on that story. Also, we're going to go to Montana, where we have another update on another trial for one of those people that was arrested in that coordinated raid last March. Well, a year ago, March. And then, you know, it's been pretty newsy that week I was gone. It seemed pretty heavy, so I've got some celebrity dish to kind of ease me back into this job, Russ. That all coming up in today's headline.
All right, and then after the news headlines, we're going to go behind the headlines. I'm going to take a look at the newly released data from the 2011 National Survey on Drug Use and Health. There's some surprising demographic and geographic information to be found there. I'm going to break it all down in the way you know that I love to do here on the Russ Belville Show, so stick around for that. At 20 after, we're going to do our daily Toker Tunes. Today is Electric Tuesday, and I'm thrilled today to have a new release, the 17th release from the Symphony of Science people. This one's called Our Biggest Challenge. We'll have that at 20 after. Then at half past the hour, we're going to go into our new segment, Students Change the World, where we speak to student activists from Students from Sensible Drug Policy. We've got students from Oregon State University and Portland State University calling in today, so we'll get their perspective on student activism here in the state of Oregon, where we're fighting for Measure 80's legalization measure that's on the ballot. And then at 45 past, we'll have time for a little bit of radical rant, so it's going to be a good time on the show today. And as I mentioned, in hour two, Toker Talk Radio will take your calls at 971-533-7111. We're just, 42 days away from Election Day, and we're going to bring you live coverage of Marijuana Election Night 2012, live from the headquarters in Seattle, Denver, and Portland, Oregon for the campaigns that are trying to legalize, and call-ins from Massachusetts, Arkansas, and Montana, where they're voting on medical marijuana, plus call-ins from the various cities voting on decriminalization. It's this election night. Stay tuned for more details.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Marijuana legalization is on the Oregon ballot this November. I'm just one of over 500,000 Oregon adults who use marijuana annually, and I'm asking you to vote yes on Measure 80. Measure 80 would finally end the futile prohibition of marijuana and institute regulations that treat marijuana like alcohol. Measure 80 would end the facade of police trying to determine who is sick or healthy enough to put in a cage over a plant. Measure 80 provides jobs and tax revenue that Oregon desperately needs and institutes the industrial hemp crop our legislators already legalized. Best of all, Measure 80 protects our children by imposing the same educational and ID carding requirements that have brought teen alcohol drinking and tobacco smoking to their lowest ever recorded levels. Marijuana smokers are your family, your coworkers, and your friends, and we are 1 out of every 7 Oregon adults who deserve the same respect as our friends who enjoy fine Oregon wines and craft beers. We may be the only Oregonians who want to pay more taxes. Please donate to Oregonians for Law Reform at OregonLawReform.com and help us help Oregon by passing Measure 80.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
Yarr! Thar be pirates here. Har, 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 har.
And now it's time for our 420 headline news with news director Karri Gallaugher.
Thanks, Russ. We've been following the criminal cases against the Montana medical marijuana dispensary owners and operators who were arrested following a statewide coordinated raid in March of 2011. This week, 2 of them were in a courtroom testifying against their former partner as part of their plea deals. Tom Daubert and Chris Lindsay both testified for the prosecution against Chris Williams, one of the only defendants so far out of almost 24 that refused a plea deal. Daubert, the 59-year-old author of the 2004 Medical Marijuana Initiative, was facing up to 20 years in prison and $500,000 in fines, but received a $50,000 fine and 5 years probation in exchange for his testimony. Daubert ran the Montana Cannabis Club along with Chris Lindsay, who was also arrested and also made a plea deal. Lindsay and Daubert told the Montana federal court yesterday that they formed a business together with Chris Williams and that he oversaw the company's growing operations in Three Forks and Helena. They also said that for protection, they often carried pistols and that there were guns in the office area of the growing facility. The case is expected to wrap up by the end of the week. One other partner, Richard Floor, whose backyard grow was the start of that commercial garden, received 5 years in prison for his involvement. Sadly, Mr. Floor died in the custody of U.S. Marshals in August while being transferred to a new prison that had better medical care for him. Floor, who suffered from a lengthy list of serious medical conditions, died in a Las Vegas hospital a day after suffering 2 heart attacks while awaiting changing transportation to a federal medical facility. And we have an update on the efforts in Springfield, Missouri to lower the penalties for marijuana possession. The city council voted to overturn the citizen initiative in a meeting last night. Supporters gathered more than 5,000 signatures of support in just over 1 month. A month ago, the city council approved that citizen initiative to reduce marijuana possession penalties to a $150 fine. They had the option to pass the ordinance or place it on the ballot, and in the interest of saving the county money by not having to print up the special ballot, they passed the ordinance with the intention of gutting it when they could. Now, at that time, many of the city council members said that they would repeal the new ordinance as soon as possible. That ordinance had not yet gone into effect. It would have barred police from arresting those with less than 35 grams of marijuana and also sending those cases to a state court. The council voted 7-2 last night to repeal that ordinance. Springfield City Attorney Dan Wishner said that the ordinance made requirements that the city council did not have the authority to do. And one more in celebrity news, R&B artist Chris Brown has failed a random drug test while serving probation. Brown is serving a 5-year probation sentence stemming from an incident where he assaulted his then-girlfriend, R&B artist Rihanna, on Grammy night in 2009. Brown had already completed 6 months of community service as part of his sentence and is about halfway through his 5-year probation when he failed that test for marijuana back in June in Virginia, where he was fulfilling his community service. According to LA Superior Court Judge Patricia Schnegg, Brown produced a California medical marijuana card after he received word of the positive test. The judge has set a hearing to decide if he violated his probation. Brown won a Grammy this year. Also taking home a Grammy this year, his ex, singer Rihanna, who is one of our favorite celebrity tokers. She's about to drop a new single called Diamonds tomorrow. It will no doubt be a hit. She released the album artwork today, and it is of her rolling diamonds into a blunt. So I guess those two crazy kids to have all the luck they need.
Thanks, Karri. And update on a story that we brought yesterday. We told you of a poll in Montana on initiated referendum 124. If this passes, then the new restrictive medical marijuana law in Montana will stand. The latest poll results show that 44% are in favor of keeping the more restrictive medical marijuana law passed in 2011, while 31% want the state to go back on the original to the original 2004 voter-passed initiative. 1/4 are undecided on how they will vote on referendum 124, which seeks to repeal the 2004 initiative and keep the 2011 changes that limit the medical conditions for which medical marijuana may be prescribed, limiting caregivers to 3 patients and not allowing them to make a profit. More details available at the San Francisco Chronicle's website, sfgate.com. From their story, poll voters favor tighter medical marijuana law.
And this has been Karri Gallaugher and Russ Belville for the Russ Belville Show. And that's your hemp headline news for today, September 25th.
All right. Thank you, Karri. When we come back, we're going to go behind the headlines and take a look at the latest national survey on drug use and health data released today. Stick around. It's the Russ Belville Show. We'll be right back.
Dear Dad, how should I say this? You know how you enjoy a drink after work? Well, in many ways, I'm just like you. I have a good job, I work hard, but when I get home, I prefer to relax with marijuana instead of alcohol. They're a little similar, but marijuana is actually less damaging to my health, and frankly, I don't feel like crap the next day. I hope this makes sense, but if not, let's talk.
Man, is that the reefer man?
That's the reefer man.
I believe he's losing his mind.
I think he's lost his mind.
This is a Russ Belville Show news alert. Whatever you do, don't smoke pot. You don't want to turn out to be a loser, like Olympian Michael Phelps, actor Jack Nicholson,
singer Miley Cyrus, rocket scientist Dr. Carl Sagan, pop star Rihanna, actress Cameron Diaz, country legend Willie Nelson, President Barack Obama, Cy Young pitcher Tim Lincecum.
Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Have you ever met that funny reefer man? If he says he swam to China and he sell you South Carolina, then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
And over 100 million other Americans.
Welcome back, everybody. 13 after the hour, and we're going to have to update that when we get behind the headlines now, because it's now over 103 million Americans who have tried marijuana in their lifetime. That's right. The National Survey on Drug Use and Health is out today, otherwise known as NSDUH, is like what I like to call it. But the National Survey is the federal government's poll, basically, on the drug-using habits of adults and children, for that matter. They survey from age 12 on up. But as I cover these statistics, I always like to focus on voting age Americans, because that's what we're here for, is to change American law with respect to cannabis, and people 18 and older are the ones that can do that. I like to point this out to show how powerful our voting demographic is if only we would become united behind this issue. Now, the survey shows that monthly marijuana use is up nearly 3% in America. That's monthly use of marijuana at least once per month. And of those people that have increased their use, 500,000 of them are over the age of 50 and eligible for AARP. Over 16 million voting age American adults will use marijuana monthly, according to the latest National Survey on Drug Use and Health for 2011, released today by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. In 2010, the survey estimated 15.6 million Americans aged 18 and older had used marijuana in the past month, a figure that has increased by 498,000 to now 16.1 million regular cannabis consumers. This represents 6.77% of all American adults of voting age who are considered criminals every month under state and federal law, or 1 out of 15 citizens aged 18 and older will smoke marijuana this month. 1 out of 15. Surprisingly, the growth in marijuana smoking appears to be solely dependent on the increased use of marijuana by older Americans. A gain of 409,000 new monthly marijuana smokers in the 18 to 29 age group was canceled out by a decline of that exact same number in the 30 to 49 age group. In other words, younger people who are known to use marijuana at greater rates, they increased 409,000. Middle-aged people decreased by the same number, canceling it out. The increase overall of nearly 500,000 marijuana consumers comes solely from the age group 50 plus. Increases of users aged 50 and older increased from 2.1 million to 2.6 million in the span of a year, an increase again of 498,000 marijuana smokers over the age of 50. And when broken down into the subgroup demographics of those older Americans, we find increases at every age group. 50 to 54-year-olds increased 57,000, 50 to 59-year-olds increased 257,000, 60 to 64-year-olds increased 76,000, and there are now 108,000 more adult Americans over the age of 65 who are smoking marijuana every month. That's 295,000 of them over the age of 65 who are smoking marijuana every month. Now, when we take a look at racial and ethnic demographics among white people, monthly marijuana smoking remains steady, and fewer African Americans are consuming marijuana monthly. However, monthly use among Asian Americans and Hispanics or Latinos is up over 18%. But monthly use by Asian Americans and Hispanics or Latinos is relatively less than those groups' representation in America. Asian Americans make up 5% of the U.S. adult population, but only 2% of monthly marijuana smokers. Hispanics and Latinos make up 16.7% of the population, 1 out of 6, but only 12.8% of the monthly marijuana smokers. Now, other surprises to be found in the 2011 National Survey on Drug Use and Health come geographically, where monthly marijuana use seems to be increasing more in regions of the country without medical marijuana laws. The Midwest has seen the greatest monthly use increase of 6.6%, or 210,000 more monthly tokers, despite having only one active medical marijuana state in the Midwest, and that would be Michigan. Increases of 4.6% were found in the Northeast, yet they have only 2 active state programs. That would be the Maine and Vermont programs. And monthly use is up 2.9% in the South. That includes Delaware, all the way up to Delaware and D.C., and of course all the way south, the regular southern states you'd think of. And there's just one active program in that list belonging to the state, or actually belonging to the District of Columbia, which isn't even truly an active program at this point. Yet in the West, the birthplace of medical marijuana, where 10 out of the 13 states surveyed have active medical marijuana programs, and 7 of them have had active medical marijuana programs for over a decade, monthly use has held statistically steady, which may actually be a decline when population increase is factored in. Now, annual use of marijuana among adults age 18 and older has now reached 26.1 million, an increase of 296,000 from the previous year. The number of adults aged 18 and older who have tried marijuana in their lifetime has now reached 103.4 million voting age adults, representing 43.5% of all voting aged adults in America. For a full breakdown of these National Survey on Drug Use and Health numbers, you can visit our blog at radicalruss.com. Look for the post, Monthly Marijuana Use Up 3%. Nearly 500,000 are AARP eligible, to find the charts and the data tables and links to the original government data. This goes to prove once again that marijuana use is mainstream. 1 out of 15 adult Americans are using marijuana every month. There is no way that there are 16.1 million criminals in America. And that sound means it's time for us to take a break. It's 20 after. When we come back, it's Electric Tuesday. We're going to bring you some more auto-tune goodness from the Symphony of Science, talking about climate change and, growing hemp would help that a whole lot.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Marijuana legalization. It's a topic everyone is talking about out west. Oregonians have always been pioneers in marijuana policy. We were the first to decriminalize personal possession in 1973 and one of the first to legalize medical marijuana use in 1998. Now it is time for Oregonians to take the lead again and become the first state to regulate marijuana like we do alcohol. We can do that by passing Measure 80 this election. Let's face it, demand for marijuana isn't going anywhere, and the longer we deny that, the more unscrupulous dealers take advantage of our medical law. With Measure 80, we will finally end abuses of medical marijuana by providing all consumers with a well-regulated, adults-only store where IDs are checked. The state reaps tax revenue, our economy gains new jobs, and our police can put their energies towards solving actual crimes. The feds may not like it, but since when do Oregonians let Washington, D.C. tell them how to run the state? 1 out of 7 Oregon adults uses marijuana, and they shouldn't be treated like criminals. Vote yes on Measure 80, and let's make marijuana work for Oregon.
Look, when I was a kid, I inhaled frequently. That was the point.
Remember, Mr. President, you once were just one bust away from being Barry the drug criminal.
Life ain't a box of chocolates gone. That's why people smoke weed and take bumps and drink way too damn much and get drunk and do it all over again first of the month.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Electric Tuesday, featuring the latest in electronic dance music and other cutting-edge genres. You can get downloads and more information about all our Daily Toker Tunes by visiting music.radicalruss.com. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tunes.
All right, welcome back, everybody. 23 after the hour, and we're turning to the Symphony of Science once again. You can get more of their videos and audio downloads from symphonyofscience.com. It's auto-tuned scientists, science fiction authors, philosophers, and so forth discussing various merits of scientific method. And today, Symphony of Science has dropped their 17th track, the newest video available, that is called Our Biggest Challenge. And we bring Carl Sagan up on the video screen here, although I don't think he's a part of this video. But to me, he represents the best of both pot smoking and theoretical physicists. So there you go. Carl Sagan gets on the screen. Our biggest challenge, of course, refers to the challenge of global climate change that is taking place at an alarming rate. If you've seen any of the video treatments of photographs from Glacier National Park and seeing those glaciers recede, if you've seen the data points up there that we've got the lowest measurement of Arctic ice ever recorded in over 150 years of recording, and if you experience some of the crazy, freaky weather that we've been having lately, immediately here, not only in the United States, but all around the world. I mean, here in Portland, Oregon, we are on track to have our driest year ever in some respects. So it's been very, very crazy. And of course, our biggest challenge is addressing this global climate change. You and I, as marijuana supporters, know how much the war on drugs has an effect on this issue of global climate change. From the production and reliance on petroleum, fossil fuels, coal, and such that dirty up our atmosphere and our planet, when we could be using hemp seed oil. We could be using that biodiesel that is actually carbon neutral. It sucks up as much carbon dioxide as it ends up spitting back out. This is the solution, or at least a part of the solution, for global climate change. And yet the futile desire to try to stop adults from smoking marijuana prevents us from making use of this beneficial and ecologically sound cash crop, industrial hemp. So in that frame of reference, we turn you over now to the Symphony of Science with our biggest challenge.
We are a flexible and innovative species, and we have the capacity to adapt and modify our behavior. Now, we most certainly have to do so if we're to deal with climate change. It's the biggest challenge we have yet faced.
The same thing that keeps the earth warm, CO2 may make the earth too warm. It holds in heat. Methane, chlorofluorocarbons, water vapor, and carbon dioxide. They all trap heat. Methane, chlorofluorocarbons, water vapor, and carbon dioxide. They all trap heat.
It is important that the world get together to face the problems which attack us as a unit.
The evidence is clear.
The globe is getting too warm.
We can avoid climate catastrophes. We can do this. We can change the world. Science offers us answers to these huge challenges.
It's one global ecosystem.
We can do this. We can change the world.
Every single thing every one of us does affects everybody all over the world. It's one global ecosystem. Warm, wet, cold or dry, climates all start in the sky. Warm, wet, cold or dry, climates all start in the sky.
When the CO2 is high, the temperature is high, moving together in lockstep. When the CO2 is low, the temperature is low, moving together.
It is important that the world get together to face the problems which attack us as a unit.
The evidence is clear.
The globe is getting too warm.
We can avoid climate catastrophes. We can do this. We can change the world. Science offers us answers to these huge challenges.
It's one global ecosystem.
We can do this. We can change the world.
Our use of fossil fuels for energy is pushing us towards a climate unlike any seen in the history of civilization.
Adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere warms things up.
The rise in CO2 comes from burning fossil fuels.
When you burn them, add oxygen and mix CO2 that goes in the air.
We're reversing the process by which they form. We're reversing the process.
We're talking about something that affects the entire earth. Problems that transcend nations. It is important that the world get together to face the problems which attack us as a unit.
The evidence is clear.
The globe is getting too warm.
We can avoid climate catastrophes. We can do this. We can change the world. Science offers us answers to these huge challenges.
It's one global ecosystem.
We can do this. We can change the world.
Symphony of Science, our biggest challenge. Check that out. Download available at RadicalRuss.com for VIP members only. Kids and marijuana. It's something every parent worries about. With Measure 80 on the ballot, many parents are worried about what message legalized marijuana would send to their children. While legalization seems scary, our experience with alcohol and tobacco show that regulation and education, not prohibition, are what best protects our children. Today, fewer teens drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes than when we were growing up. And that's because we passed strict ID carding regulations, put beer and cigarettes out of kids' reach, and educated them about the real harms of smoking and drinking. In fact, teen smoking and drinking are at their lowest recorded levels ever, and we didn't arrest a single adult for cigarettes and beer to accomplish that. Kids consistently say that beer is harder to buy than pot. After Measure 80, marijuana is treated like alcohol. You have to be 21, you have to show ID, and you have to go to an adults-only store. The message we send to kids today is just say no, and it doesn't work. Let's send the message that marijuana is for adults, and someday they can make that decision for themselves. Vote yes on Measure 80.
When I was in England, I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it, and didn't inhale, and never tried it again.
I think you'd probably be a lot cooler if you had, Mr. President.
I said, hey, do you have it going, kids? Girl, would be a lot cooler if you did. Lie, don't hide it. Oh, lie, don't hide it. Just lie, don't hide it. Find love right
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's 31 past the hour, and this is our new segment, Students Change the World. And obviously, I don't have an intro liner for it yet, so it is still part of the activist agenda, though. And some of the most important activists out there are the students that are working with Students for Sensible Drug Policy. You can find out more at ssdp.org. And one of the fine student leaders joining us right here from the Beaver State, a Beaver himself, SSDP Oregon State University's Daniel Bauer is on the line. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, so glad to have you here. So is this your first year with SSDP there in Oregon State?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I didn't get involved with SSDP until March, whenever we had the Oregon conference.
Okay, and speaking of that Oregon conference, folks, that was a big event that happened here. At the time, we had 3 different leadership groups that were positioned to put initiatives forth on marijuana legalization. And of the 3, Paul Stanford and Measure 80, the so-called Oregon Cannabis Tax Act, have remained standing. At that event, back there in March, the students, SSDP students of 7 different campuses voted unanimously to go with a competing initiative. So since we saw you last at that event, how have SSDP been reacting to the failure of the initiative you backed to make the ballot and the one you didn't back has made the ballot? What's happening with that?
Well, here pretty soon, I believe we are going to be coming out and fully endorsing Measure 80 because we haven't yet, and that's something that we need to get on. And we are working in every capacity possible to try and help the campaign as much as possible.
Fantastic. So there's no hard feelings or anything. Everybody's just working together to get legalization in whatever form it makes the ballot.
Exactly. We can't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Absolutely. Now, speaking to students there in Corvallis, and, I speak to folks that are at U of O and Western Oregon and Portland State and so forth, is the student population aware that they have legalization on the ballot this year?
Well, some of them are, and some of them aren't, and that's where we come in. One of our goals is to spread awareness on campus and do voter registration drives, try and really pull in the new crowd and create more activists for us.
What is it that got you involved in going to that March event? Is that the first time you'd heard of SSDP, or is this the first thing that was the major event that got you catalyzed?
Well, actually, I found out about SSDP through a link on MAPS's website, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies.
Okay.
And I was looking around for chapters in my area, and I saw Oregon State. I figured Oregon has to have one, but they didn't. So I took it upon myself to start the chapter there, and the first time that I actually met anybody else involved with SSDP was at the March conference, and it really kind of brought me into the fold, and everybody was warm and welcoming, and life hasn't been the same since.
Yeah, that's fabulous to hear. How has the chapter been growing there at Oregon State? Are you starting to get a lot more recognition and people wanting to join now that you got the new fall semesters in tow here?
We are. We just started school on Monday, so it's still pretty fresh, but we are doing everything we can to promote the outreach on campus, and actually started the chapter with a few friends in graduate school their last spring term, and we just barely made the deadline to become a chapter. Unfortunately, everybody has since graduated that helped me start the chapter, so I'm doing a little bit of catch up, and it's
all right.
On me.
Well, listeners here in Oregon, if you know folks that are going to Oregon State University, please let them know that the SSDP chapter is there and it's looking for new people. That's always one of the toughest things, compared to other activist organizations. For instance, Bruce Margolin, for instance, has been running Los Angeles Normal for 30, 40 years now. But with SSDP chapters, you got the problem of people constantly graduating and moving on and always having to build a new cadre of leadership. So, is that happening there for your Oregon State chapter? I mean, you've gotten more underclassmen that are getting involved?
Yes, absolutely. We have a campus fair where out in the courtyard, for lack of a better term, they have tables set up of all the student organizations, and we're going to be involved with that and trying to get more underclassmen involved and hopefully build a solid organization that'll last once I'm gone.
Excellent. What are some of your goals with SSDP there at Oregon State? Are there some specific, campus rules or anything that need changing? What are some of the projects that you're going to work on?
Well, one of the projects that we have going on right now, is that I'm going to be holding a lecture educating the public and the botany department and anybody who would like to come about the botany and ethnobotany of cannabis. I'm a botany major myself, and I minor in chemistry, and so it just seems like there's a real lack of true education readily available on the campus regarding it. So I'm trying to fill that gap.
That's a really great idea, and folks listening here from nationwide may not recognize the fact that Oregon State University is a major agricultural research university, so it only makes sense that, especially with our love of cannabis in the state, that they would know or be teaching the facts about this, but like you say, it's usually not a topic that they cover much in depth, is it?
No, not very much at all. Yeah. And there's been some research at Oregon State involving industrial hemp. But the researcher who is the head of that has since passed on, and nobody has continued his work.
I think I recall some of his research from Oregon State, and I think if I'm recalling the right study, he was pointing out how some of the claims of industrial hemp may be a little bit overblown as far as, how much could be produced, how well it could work. Is that the research? Are you familiar with that?
Yes. Yeah, it's a feasibility of industrial hemp in the United States Pacific Northwest, and if you look that up, it's right on Oregon State's website, the entire study.
Oh.
But it talks about how actually some of the most ideal place for farming hemp in Oregon is up in the Columbia Valley, and so the Willamette Valley, we actually have a little bit too high of a clay content in the soil for it to work perfectly, but some areas would have hemp farming. But generally, anywhere that you can grow corn, hemp is going to thrive.
Yeah, so while Oregon could grow some amount of hemp crops, probably someplace like Kansas or Nebraska would do a lot better.
Yes, yeah, exactly, and Kentucky would definitely be in there too.
Yeah. Now, Daniel, as far as this goes, with respect to marijuana and everybody's knowledge about that, how hard is it in the area you're at, in Corvallis, it seems to me, I'm a recent transplant to the state. I've been here about 9 years, but it seems to me that the general feeling is University of Oregon's kind of the hippy-dippy liberal school, and Oregon State's kind of the more conservative, rural, farming type of school. How does your participation in SSDP affect you on campus with your other professors and so forth?
I was kind of leery of that at first, and I wasn't really sure what the dynamic was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But since I've come out, I guess, in terms of legalization and being an activist, I've really found a lot of support, and especially in the botany department. I'm getting some upper division credits for an internship that I did with Todd Delato, who is the chair of the advisory committee on medical marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And he also runs CAN Research here in Corvallis, which focuses on phytocannabinoid research and the horticultural research involved with cannabis.
Wow, that's amazing. Getting internship credit for working with a state organization, a state committee that advises on medical marijuana. That's not the kind of credits you can get just anywhere in America, is it?
No, I feel very blessed to have this opportunity.
How lucky for you! All right, so when we take a look at being a botany major here, we can play a little inside baseball because our listenership is pretty well educated on cannabis. What are some some things about the botany of cannabis that are, I don't know, maybe urban myths or common myths, things that people think about pot that isn't really true that you've learned from your botany experience?
Oh man.
I'll give you one that I heard the other day. It was in the debates about Measure 80, and they said how hemp was the male plant. How's that?
Yeah. That's not true. It's actually an annual dioecious, which means that the sexes of the plants are on separate plants.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a male plant and a female plant that are required to cross-pollinate in order to get seeds. Now you can have the general term for it is called a hermaphrodite, but in Latin that means perfect flower. So Todd and I have this idea that we can change this slowly, the term, into a gynodiclinus, which is...
Sounds like a dinosaur.
Yes, it does. In Latin, it means essentially the combined flower parts in one location.
Right. Gyno would be the feminine term from Greek, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's another thing. In speaking, one of my friends who was just on the show yesterday, Jorge Cervantes, the internationally known grower, likes to point out that in botany, you wouldn't call it strains, you'd call it varietals or varieties. Is he correct on that point?
Yes, varietals, or even you could go with cultivars as well.
Cultivars. Oh boy. The more science we learn, the better, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And I, on the side note, I appreciate you having the Symphony of Science on before me. Thank you very much.
I'll open with Symphony of Science every time you're on the show. It just has to be on Tuesdays. As it so happens, that's when our student segment is anyway. So that'll work out perfectly. I'm glad you like that.
Yeah.
So how go the grades now? Doing well in school?
Yeah, catching back up. It's been a real trip trying to learn how to balance SSDP, school, my life. It's been a change because I moved up here in Oregon just a little over a year ago, and so learning to live on my own plus learning to balance school, and then I got involved with SSDP, which has just been a whirlwind of activity.
Where did you move to Oregon from?
Kansas.
From Kansas. So comparing the marijuana culture in Kansas to Oregon State University, that's got to be like going from Iceland to a sauna. It's gotta...
Yes. Exactly.
Well,
a radical shift.
A radical change. Well, Daniel Bauer with SSDP, Oregon State University. If people want to help out, learn more, you guys got website, Twitter, Facebook, anything you need to tell us about?
Yes, sorry. Go on to Facebook and look up SSDP OSU, and you will find us there. Also at OregonSSDP.com. We have all of our chapters listed there, and we're constantly trying to do updates and maintain the website. And also, if you want to get in contact with me, my email is danielb.ssdp@gmail.com.
danielb.ssdp@gmail.com. Daniel Bauer from Oregon State University. Go Beavs. Thanks for being on the show. Appreciate it. And thanks for being a part of the new generation of marijuana activists.
Thank you very much for having me here.
You betcha. All right, when we come back, we'll have a little bit of time for Radical Rant. I'm going to take more of a look at the National Survey on Drug Use and Health and the way the media is framing this and the way Gateway Gil Kurlikowski wants you to think about it. Be right back after this.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Have you considered medical marijuana? Double-blind, peer-reviewed studies have found cannabinoid therapies to be successful in treating the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, brain cancers, chronic pain, diabetes mellitus, dystonia, fibromyalgia, GI disorders, hepatitis C, HIV/AIDS, hypertension, incontinence, MRSA, multiple sclerosis, osteoporosis, pruritus, rheumatoid arthritis, sleep apnea, and Tourette's syndrome, as well as anecdotal evidence suggesting relief from anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress, plus reduction in the need for narcotic painkillers. Side effects of medical marijuana can include euphoria, relaxation, anxiety, panic reactions, paranoia, tachycardia, dry eyes, dry mouth, concentration and reaction time impairment, appetite increase, and in 37 states, arrest and incarceration. But medical marijuana is non-toxic and cannot cause overdose. Medical marijuana. It's not for everyone, but ask your doctor if medical marijuana may be right for you.
Georgia.
Hi, this is Willie Nelson, and I need your help. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 20s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stop arresting law-abiding citizens because they prefer marijuana over alcohol. Nearly 2,000 Americans are arrested every day on marijuana charges. We're unfairly destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of people each year simply because they smoke marijuana. These are not criminals. They're average citizens like you, good neighbors who work hard, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to their communities. We need your help to end marijuana prohibition once and for all. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant. Welcome back, 47 after the hour. We're going to take another look a little deeper behind the headlines in the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, which we reported earlier today shows that 43.5% of all voting age Americans have tried marijuana in their lifetime, and 16.1 million of us, or 1 out of 15, are using marijuana every single month in this country. Okay, so this Gateway Gil and Kevin Sabet and these guys that all want to punish us somehow for our use of marijuana are going to have to start to recognize that there's an increasing number of us who really strongly feel that we're not criminals in any sort of way. Now, I wanted to take a look at some of the reactions throughout the media on this and how they're spinning the latest data. Because when I get it, I go right to the marijuana data. I don't care how many people are using cocaine or heroin or prescription drugs. I don't care, right? That's drug problems. Go ahead. That's someone else's, deal with drug problems. I'm dealing with marijuana here. But I first got this note from USA Today. And one of the headlines says, prescription drug abuse drops among U.S. adults. Marijuana remains most popular. Although overall drug use in the U.S. has declined slightly, The rate of marijuana use increased to 7% from a low of 5.8% in 2007. Oh no! Oh gosh! So let me see if I'm getting this right. There's less overall drug use, and then the people that are using drugs are more often using marijuana. Let me give you some of the numbers here. They say marijuana use went up from 5.8% of all people. Now, this is, by the way, when they give you these numbers from NSDA, they're always giving you ages 12 and older. I've never agreed with doing that, the 12 and older. I don't think that's right because, well, we don't think people 12 years old should be using drugs. So I always like to deal with adults. But anyway, these are for the numbers 12 and older. They say from 2007, use of marijuana went from 5.8% of the population to 7% of the population. But guess what else happened? The use of cocaine went from 0.8% of the population to 0.5% of the population. Isn't that good to know? The use of pain relievers, things like OxyContin, from 2.1% to 1.7%. What? Are you telling me that as more people used marijuana, fewer people used prescription painkillers? Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Use of tranquilizers has remained steady at 0.7%. Use of stimulants has remained steady at 0.4%. Use of sedatives has remained steady at 0.1%. So, looking through the headline here, USA Today, Donna Lager writes, prescription drug use drops among young people. And this is the big takeaway from the numbers here, that the use of prescription drugs, OxyContin, Dilaudid, Adderall, etc., among young people has dropped. And the lead paragraph, prescription drug abuse in the USA declined last year to the lowest rate since 2000. Actually, to be accurate, the USA Today printed story says, prescription drug abuse in the USA declined last year to the lowest rate since 2002. So, typo there in the USA Today. But anyway, dropped to the lowest rate since 2002 amid federal and state crackdowns on drug-seeking patients and over-prescribing doctors. Young adults drove the drop. The number of people 18 to 25 who regularly abuse prescription drugs fell 14% to 1.7 million, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health reported Monday. But let me give you a behind the stat on that, right? Because these things don't happen in a vacuum, people. These things happen in relation to other drug use. When we look at the age group, 18 to 25 that they had just mentioned, the 18 to 25 age group, let me just get some numbers here. Monthly use of marijuana among the 18 to 25 age group now accounts for 6.5 million monthly users aged 18 to 25. The year before, it was 6.3 million monthly users. Now, I don't have the 2007 numbers on me, but I can tell you that this number has been increasing, and this has been something the drug czar has been, running around with his hair on fire about, is that more and more young people, aged 18 to 25 in this case, are using marijuana. And yet, that same age group, the use of the prescription painkillers is dropping. They want to ascribe that to crackdowns on drug-seeking patients and overprescribing doctors. Why could it not also be, at least partially responsible, that young people have discovered marijuana works better for them than those prescription pain relievers? They find they don't need to go get the Oxys and the Percocets to deal with their pain. And the other thing that bothers me when we talk about these numbers is that they assume that the non-prescription use of something like OxyContin or, some sort of painkiller, or even Adderall or whatever, is an abuse. They just assume that. Since you don't have a prescription, you're abusing Percocet. You're abusing OxyContin. As if 18 to 25-year-olds could not have the possible dual tragedy of suffering from chronic pain and not having health insurance or means to get prescriptions. That's entirely possible, that a lot of those 6.5 million that they're talking about, or the number of young adults here, the 1.7 that are using prescription drugs without prescriptions, that of that 1.7 million, a significant percentage of them could be actually using and not abusing those drugs, that they may actually have pain and they may have no way of getting a legitimate prescription? Of course, that's hard for us to find out, right? I'm just kind of speculating here. Now, another issue here is they found that in 2011, 6.1 million people abused narcotic pain pills, tranquilizers, stimulants, and sedatives, down from 7 million in 2010. That's right, pain pill abuse dropped from 2.1% of the population in 2009 to 1.7% in 2011. Again, a decline in pharmaceutical use as we see an increase in marijuana use. And they refuse to think that there's anything going on between those two stats that have anything to do with each other. When in fact, I talk to medical marijuana patients day after day who tell me in no uncertain terms that marijuana works better for their pain. And for those that do have the severe pain that still requires opiate painkillers, that the opiate painkillers work better with fewer pills when they're using cannabis. So that's the first thing I'd like to take out of the national survey here that's not being reported by the media. They like to point out how marijuana use is going up. They like to point out how prescription pills are going down. They refuse to correlate the two. Now, they'll do correlation is causation on anything else, right? If it's going to paint marijuana in a bad light, they'll jump right on the correlation bandwagon. But here, where there's a correlation that could be saying that marijuana use is helping to reduce prescription drug abuse, they won't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Now, let's continue along here. Gil Kurlikowski says, he gets into this and mentions that in 2011, 22.5 million Americans 12 or older, nearly 9% of the population, said they regularly used illicit drugs such as marijuana, cocaine, heroin, hallucinogens, and inhalants, or abused prescription drugs, including pain relievers, tranquilizers, stimulants, and sedatives. Sounds like a party at Ganja John's house. While cocaine abuse has dropped from 2.4 million regular users in 2006 to 1.4 million last year, heroin abuse is rising. The number of people who reported regular heroin use grew from 161,000 in 2007 to 281,000 in 2011. Now, remember the correlation equals causation train? You didn't think maybe somebody would jump on that bandwagon with respect to those heroin items, would you? Oh, of course they would. That's where our good friend Kevin Sabet jumps in on this in his viewpoints, talking about how the marijuana today is so much stronger than the marijuana of the past. Most of the people who may use it will become addicted to it, depending a dependence that produces withdrawal and cravings and so forth and so on. So once again, good news about marijuana could be helping to reduce prescription overuse. That's not a correlation. But if heroin use went up, oh my gosh, that's the end of the world. But again, let's look at the total numbers there. They're saying there are now 1.4 million regular cocaine users and 281,000 regular heroin users. And what was that number of regular marijuana users again? Oh yeah, 16.1 million regular marijuana users. So marijuana use completely dwarfs all other illicit and licit drug abuse, except, of course, for alcohol and tobacco. 103 million voting age adults who have tried marijuana in their lifetime, yet only 281,000 people regularly using heroin. So much for the gateway theory. 103 million tried marijuana, and for the vast, vast majority of them, it did not lead them to a life of heroin addiction. Furthermore, they found that the use of marijuana among teens is continuing to rise slightly, and the use of alcohol and tobacco continue their downward slide, with kids using less tobacco than they use marijuana. The survey shows that 44.8% of teens think smoking marijuana is risky, compared to 54.6% who thought it was risky in 2007. Now, Kurlikowski likes to say voter initiatives to legalize and regulate marijuana send the message that marijuana is medicine. I think they're getting a bad message on marijuana. They think it's medicine and should be legalized, and that's a bad message. No, Gil, the message the kids are getting today is called the Google, and they're able to look up all of your bald-faced lies about marijuana harms and disprove them with the government's own numbers and scientific studies. You can't pull the wool over the kids' eyes anymore. They have seen the truth, and the truth has set them free, Gil. Oh my goodness. That's all the time I got here for Hour 1. Thanks for joining us here. For Cannabis Carry, I'm Radical Russ. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers. Stick around. Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio is next.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you